Assalamu alaikum and hello. Welcome to the Mindful Muslim podcast. On this episode, I'll be speaking with the amazing Raisa Giwala. She's a personal coach. We spoke about divorce and relationships and how to find peace and clarity within relationships during divorce and also importantly after divorce. It's an amazing conversation and I really hope it helps you spiritually, mentally, psychologically, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, Raisa. Thank you so much for joining me on the Mindful Muslim podcast today. How are you doing?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I am awesome and I'm so excited to be here. Always love talking to people who are out and about sharing wonderful messages and bringing us closer to our fitrah. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. Well, it'd be great if you could tell us a bit about yourself. Tell us what got you where you are today, I suppose, with, I believe you're a personal coach. Is that right?
Yes, I am. Okay, so how did I get here? it's the story of my life, right? So I am the divorced Muslimah coach. That's how I put myself out into the world, and how I got to that point is going through a really high conflict divorce after 17 years of marriage. This was about 8 years ago. I decided that what ended up happening is this test for me brought me to a place and a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and myself in a way that I never knew before. So, my goal now is to help other women who are going through the roughest time of their life when their marriage breaks down, in a breakup, going through a divorce, to help them use this experience, this test, to also come back to their fitrah, to come back closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and use this as a means to elevate themselves, their character for this life, and elevate spiritually in the eyes of Allah. So it's a win-win for them, and become the best version of themselves for their next chapter.
Amazing. So, would you say, was it going through your own divorce is what motivated you to want to support this particular group of women? Or were there other things involved that really motivated you?
Primarily this, because I felt that, I am traditionally trained as a pharmacist, and I've been doing that for like 24 years. So I've put that to the side and I'm focusing on this because I realized that I went through this experience for a reason and for a purpose. And it sprouted up in my heart that, if I can go through this and come out elevated, anyone else can, everyone else can. And so there has to be a purpose and a reason behind going through such a difficult test for a Muslimah, for a woman. And so I felt inspired. I felt inspired by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I did not go through this for any, for in vain. I did go through this for a reason and a purpose. So that's what's really spoke to my heart, to really help other women along the path, as I've also been helped as well.
It's amazing to hear that you want to use your own experiences to help others. Just on that journey, what kind of was there any sort of pivotal moments in your life or real triggers that again motivated you to begin helping others with it? Because I can imagine it can be quite challenging and you don't sort of reach it, straight away after your divorce. I'm sure there was lots of reflection and time that you took.
Yeah, that's a great question. It is a journey, right? And that's what this life in this world is. It's a journey of us coming from Allah, walking on this path with Allah to return back to Allah. And so for me, those moments, you talk about triggers and you talk about you're asking me about what was a reflection like. For me, during that time when I was separating, it was very extremely painful because I had lived a life of codependency my whole life. And so when all the doors are being shut, when all of the people are no longer available for you that you used to rely on, there was nowhere else to turn except to turn up to Allah. And so in that way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed me where my reliance was, showed me who my reliance needs to be on. And so it was a journey of literally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala holding my hand and me reaching out to him, because there is no one else. There is no one or nothing else. And Allah is the ultimate source for us. So I was shown bit by bit by bit. And when I asked for help, when I asked for support, I asked for sabr, I asked for healing, I didn't get that on a silver platter. That's not how it works. I was given multiple tests after tests after tests, within myself, with my children, with my life, all of these things to help me to turn back to Allah in every one of those tests in order to overcome the test and become successful in it, meaning learn a lesson from it, meaning grow from it, meaning expand from it, and then also to become closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Lovely. My next question sort of comes in two parts. I'd love you to share how long you've been doing your personal coaching for and working with women, how long that's been, since when. And the other is, in your experience thus far, what kind of are common things that you think couples face in marriages?
Yeah, I love that question. I have a lot to say about that second question. So as I was going through my own healing, and like I said, I don't want to say I found, but I asked Allah, and Allah sent the people to me to help me, coaches, mentors, counselors. And on that journey, that's when I decided, look, I'm benefiting so much from this. I'm inspired to do this for others. So I became certified as a high performance coach. I became certified as a back to the fitra educator, mentor, and coach, as I was doing my own healing journey. And I've been doing this with divorced Muslim women since 2017. And I've worked with women one-on-one. I work also with women in a group setting, building a sisterhood. And I've also worked with men. I've also worked with teenagers now. And I've also worked with married couples. And to answer that question, to get into that question, what type of things are couples facing in marriage? And I think one of the biggest things that I've learned and I've seen is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts us together, joins hearts and puts us together with our partner. And he knows who he's putting who together with and why. And I think one of the common pitfalls and mistakes is that we get triggered with our childhood wounds or the places in us that need to be healed. Let's put it that way. Through our most intimate connections, our parents, our children, our partners, our spouse, right? Our siblings even. However, this marital relationship is not a bond through blood, right? Whereas the parents, children, siblings, they are a bond through blood. So we have obligation to maintain those blood ties. However, with the marriage and the spouse, living together day in, day out, you will connect with each other, and you will have moments of being stimulated or triggered to things that are within you that need to be healed. And the biggest mistake that I see is that when that happens, right away, either we're not taught or we don't understand or we don't know, we blame the other person for you're making me angry, you're upsetting me, you're frustrating me. And not taking ownership or responsibility. Wait a minute, I'm feeling upset, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling frustrated. Well, I own those emotions, and that belongs to me. Why? Because in those feelings, we like to say at Back to the Fitra Academy, that's a love letter from Allah to you. To pause, to see, okay, there's something in here that I need to learn, that I need to heal from. And that's between me and Allah. Because the mistake is that if we believe that everything, like whatever our partner is doing is to blame for our emotional state or well-being, anger, sadness, frustration, whatever it is, then we're missing the point, number one. And then the other pitfall of that is we can become justified to treat our partner in a way we think that they deserve because we believe that they're the cause of our feelings.
Mm.
What,
So
did that make
powerful. You're
sense?
really making me think. Yeah, absolutely. Crystal clear, actually. Um, I want to move on a little bit. I'm sure we'll touch on this again, but let's move on a little bit about certain, I suppose we could call warning signs that a partner might see in their marriage that should signal to them, I should be thinking about divorce.
Mm. Well, first I want to say that divorce is the ultimate last resort. Like we don't want to, we don't want to head to divorce for every friction, for every, struggle, because in partnerships, in relationships, in life, we're going to have ups and downs, and we are capable of not running away every time there is a friction. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us that way, resilient, intelligent, and then you add taqwa and tawakkul in there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us this person, is giving us this test for a reason. So the divorce would be, with multiple signs, So you talk about warning signs when they come up, things to notice. As I mentioned earlier, when talking about the self, when you're looking at your own self, I talked about blaming your partner, right? However, that could happen on the other side as well, right? Your partner could blame you for their feelings and project that onto you and dump that onto you and say like, oh, because you did this, I got angry, or I yelled, or I did this, or I did that, right? Not taking ownership for their own behavior, their own actions. So that's number one, recognizing that. And once we recognize that, well, what do we do, right? Because when we're in those situations, it's human nature to become defensive. When you're being attacked, or when you're being oppressed or suppressed in some way, or unjustly accused, it's human nature to become defensive and then like fight back, right? However, that just creates two egos fighting, and that doesn't solve the issue. So learning how to allow the other person to take, not even if they don't take ownership for their feelings and their actions, learning to leave that for them, and you deal with your, okay, what is this bringing up for me? These feelings of upset, of anger, of being treated unfairly or unjustly. And we see this in kids, why kids get angry but then they get suppressed, because when they feel unjustness or unfairness, that they're being treated that way, it's human nature to retaliate. It's human nature to speak up, right? But the thing is that we don't want to just take our feelings, I'm going to purposely say feelings of anger, frustration, unfairness, and then just throw it back to the other person, because it will cause an explosion. We want to be mindful, okay, well, what needs to be done? Meaning having clarity. What needs to be done? What needs to be said? What's the right thing that needs to be expressed? And expression and communication is very key and important in relationships. And especially when we're talking about marriage here, many of us don't know how to express and communicate in an authentic way that doesn't attack the other person. So like, I was just reading something the other day where a wife was talking about how, she was so upset with her husband's behavior. So then she started telling him how his behavior was causing her all these problems. Of course, that's going to make someone defensive as well, right? So how can we communicate in a calm, neutral way, actually in the prophetic way, and the way the Prophet ﷺ used to, give nasiha or give advice, is you can't be emotionally heightened, because then your emotions are what's going to get communicated and not the message. So, to kind of sum that up, the warning signs would be when you're being attacked or blamed for someone else's feelings or actions. Now, in that, this is why self-reflection is so important, to reflect on, in a relationship, there's two parts. You have a role that you play, and the other person has a role that they play. You take responsibility and ownership for yours, and you allow the other person to take responsibility and ownership for theirs. And with all the women that I've worked with, what gets happened is that the women take responsibility for everything. They take that upon themselves, and it's a learned behavior. So learning to separate what's yours and what's not yours, and then how are you going to show up in communicating to this person what is wrong, and we call this setting limits or setting boundaries, right? Of what type of behavior is acceptable, what is not acceptable. But for that, you have to know yourself, and you have to have that level of God-centric self-love first to be able to know that and to communicate that.
Amazing. That was really clear. I'm very interested to know more about how one can go about that sort of self-reflection, to really begin to understand your own feelings, to then be able to separate. Are there sort of initial guidance that you give the people that you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right about that. You know, in my journey, most of my life up until I was going through my divorce, I had no idea about self-awareness. My whole life was revolving around what other people were doing, what other people were saying, how other people were perceiving me. And that's how I related with myself. I had no idea what was meant, that there was such a thing as self-awareness, like that there was such a thing as the self, like a relationship with yourself. That exists whether you realize it or not. And you know, one of the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran is to contemplate and to reflect, and like how an hour of reflection and contemplation is greater than, you know, I don't remember the figure, but it's greater than thousands of units of worship. Okay? Because how I like to explain it in my course is that, what is the goal of Ramadan? The goal of Ramadan is taqwa, right? It's attaining taqwa, which is God consciousness, right? Some people describe it as fear of Allah, or, you know, I like to describe it as consciousness of Allah. However, we can never get there if we don't have self-consciousness. And what is that? What is self-consciousness? Self-consciousness is self-awareness. Awareness of that you're an individual with thoughts, with feelings, and that they belong to you, and they don't come from anything outside of you. Your thinking patterns and your how you're feeling about yourself, about life, about whatever's going on, is a reflection of your own internal reality. So the first thing is becoming aware of the self, and how you exist in this world. And part of, you know, what I teach to help people understand that is understanding how their human psychological experience works. Meaning that we are a spiritual being housed in a physical body, having a spiritual psychological experience in a physical world that we live in. So yes, there is to understand, like, where do our thoughts come from? What do they mean? And the gist of it is very simple. However, the understanding of it is very, very deep, meaning that our feelings are always being created by our thought in the moment, meaning that no one can make us feel anything, and we can't make other people feel anything, because it's an inside job, meaning that our feelings are not coming from our circumstance or our situation or what someone is doing or saying. Our feelings are always coming from our thinking around those things. So it takes the power out of the person, the situation, and the circumstance, and it puts the power back within us. And that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with, has empowered us with, creating our own reality, being conscious of our own reality. And then from that space, that affects how you show up.
It just leads me to think about sort of when you hear people say, that person makes me feel good, or I fell in love with that person because they make me feel good. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love that. It's so true. And majority of the world operates like that. I believe that as well until I understood how it really works. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not give anybody or anything, anyone or anything, power over us to control our feelings. So when we say, oh, this person made me feel so happy, it's not the person that is making you feel happy. It's your thinking that you're having around this person that is reflecting your feelings. Your feelings are just indicating to you the quality of your thoughts, your thinking that's going on. And get this, Yvonne, 95% of our thinking is at the subconscious level. Have you heard that before?
Not 95%.
Yes. Well, there are statistics saying 90%, 95%, but well, a big portion, the majority of our thinking happens at the subconscious level. Like, I mean, do we think about getting up in the morning and going to refreshing ourselves, to brush our teeth, to like, even driving? Like, all of these things are done subconsciously, right? We're not actively, consciously thinking about the steps we need to take to do these things. And that's how we work as a human being until, like, most of us are on autopilot in life, just doing, whatever we've been trained or conditioned, programmed to do. However, as a human being, we are capable of so much more than that. That is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has elevated the human creation above all other creations, because he's given us intelligence and intellect, and he's given us the ability to be conscious, to choose what we are going to do, and to attach our intention behind it of why we're going to do it, right? And so it's not the person that's making you feel that way. It's the thinking that you're having going on deep down inside around this person. And that's all attached to your values. It's attached to your beliefs. It's attached to your sense of self and your sense of worth. We all have it, whether we realize it or not. It's been conditioned. It's there underneath, whether we're aware of it or not. And the journey is all about becoming aware.
And all of that you mentioned, all the programming, all those things that are already essentially present inside us, how much of that do you believe is genetics, and how much of that do you think is our childhood and our upbringing and our parents and our babyhood?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I say it's already inside of us, and I mean programmed, it's our nurturing, okay? There is our fitra that is hardwired in us. The way we come, when we come from Jannah into our mother's womb into this world, we come hardwired on the fitra. What does that mean? That means that we are hardwired to seek Allah, to know Allah, to worship Allah. And if we don't find that, we will seek and know and worship other than Allah. And that will start seeping into our heart, because that's how we're designed. And then, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that says every child is born as on the fitrah on Islam. It's his parents that make him a Christian or a Jew or an atheist or a Muslim, right? Like that nurture that faith within them. So yes, when I talk about programming, what I'm specifically referring to is our how we've been nurtured in our environment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows which parents he's given us, which time he's brought us into this world in, the environments, the experiences, the tests, and all those. He knows what he sent to us. However, it's how we process our life and our childhood experiences, how we process them, and the beliefs that we adopt from going through that, right? And it's also the way we cope with hard times, the coping mechanisms that we've developed to stay safe, to stay secure, and to survive in our world. And that starts, from birth. It starts from birth of what we adopt. And the human is a very capable species of adapting and surviving. Alhamdulillah, shukr Allah. Like, that's how amazing we are. However, the beliefs and the coping mechanisms we adopt in our childhood are very immature, right? They're childlike thinking, they're childlike adaptations of how to survive. And if we're not conscious, the default is we carry those thinking patterns, those coping patterns into our adulthood, because it's just, by the time we're 7 years old, everything's programmed in our subconscious. How we respond to stress, how we respond to anger, how we respond to joy, how we respond to fear. So it just kicks in like a program and we're not aware. However, as an adult, as we become conscious, we get to uncover what those thinking patterns are. Are they helpful? Are they harmful? I picked them up when I was a child, but I'm a mature adult now. I don't have to choose to keep thinking in those ways, in those patterns. And I can find new, healthier coping mechanisms to help me deal with my life and my stress. And that's where turning to Allah and taqwa and tawakkul come in.
Amazing. I think you've just shared so much knowledge there. Thank you. Do you think one of the reasons why then we as adults can find it difficult to change our behaviors and our thinking is because of the subconscious and all that programming that we had as a child, as you say, till the age of 7? It's pretty much all there. Is that what makes it difficult to then, one, be aware of how you're thinking and behaving, and then secondly, to try to change it?
That can very well be. That can very well be, because really, if you look into it, we're just a program. As a species, we're just a program acting out our programming. However, this is where what I mentioned earlier about blame comes in. Okay. Taking accountability, taking responsibility for your thinking, your feelings, your behaviors, your actions, your decisions. This is why it's so important, because when we start doing that, we can uncover all the things within us that we would like to change. Because most people know what they need to do, but why is it that they're not doing it? And most people, like, if you choose or you dare to look within, you'll find, well, I want to be better at this. I want to be a better human. That's part of our fitrah. We are driven to be better human beings, to elevate and to live with ihsan. That's part of our birthright. That's hardwired in us. And it's difficult. Why? Because we have to fight against our nafs. We have to fight against our ego, because our ego and the way that our ego is trying to keep us safe and protected. And that's what it did in childhood. So it's going to fight against you. Oh, no, it's this person's fault. Oh, no, it can't be you. Has to be someone else. And then shaitan gets in there and he solidifies those thinking patterns. So then you get stuck and you get lost. And this is why we need mentorship. We need guidance, because our ego can very easily spin us around and take us for a loop and take us to the other side, if we're not aware of how there's a difference between how we feel and truth. And many times we believe what we're feeling is truth, when the truth only lies with Allah. So how do we get there? How do we get to that level of clarity and that closeness where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removes those veils for us to allow us to see from our spiritual heart what is truth and what is not?
One thing that I picked up on while you
So
were
the answer to that
speaking.
question.
Yeah, go on.
Sorry. No, I was just saying that the answer to that question is simply personal accountability, personal responsibility. Because at the end of the day, we all have to stand in front of Allah and count for ourselves.
So say you were giving some sort of helpful tip to a person that you were working with. Do you think something like approaching a conversation with your partner and saying, or beginning or saying things that begin with I, do you think that's a good way of going about it? So saying, I am feeling this. This is how I feel in this situation. Do you think that's helpful?
I think it's definitely a great start, especially when you haven't been communicating that way, it's always been about you, like pointing the finger and blame. I think it's definitely a great start to shift, because relationships, it's not like a black and white thing, and it's not like a all or nothing thing. It's like it's a gradual transition of you changing, and then you shifting in how you communicate, and then that brings about shift in the relationship, in the dynamics. So I would say that's definitely a great start. And as I said earlier, you know, as I said earlier, the thing about feelings, right? We can talk about feelings. However, there is a difference between doing the right thing or saying the right thing versus expressing your feelings. Meaning that, remember, feelings are just indicating the quality of our thinking. Okay? And what I'm trying to describe is there's a difference between expressing your feelings, which is just what you're thinking, right? Because feelings are a reflection of the thoughts that are going on underneath in the moment, in the present moment. And there's a difference between being in your heart-centered wisdom, being connected to yourself and being connected to Allah, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always guiding us. Always. He's always guiding us through our wisdom, our basira, our intuition. And being connected to that comes from here, comes from the heart. It doesn't come from the head. Our feelings and our thinking comes from the head. And so when you're present in the moment, connected to yourself, and you have goodwill towards the person in front of you, especially in a marriage, with any relationship, but especially in a marriage, when you have goodwill, you know, and you have taqwa, you're going to communicate in a way very intuitively, with wisdom. You will know what to say and what not to say, because sometimes keeping silent is better. And allowing space, and sitting in the discomfort of your own feelings, and holding that space for yourself and allowing space for interaction, I think is very powerful. So for example, asking questions like, you know, what do you think would be a good way for us to deal with this? And being open here to hearing the other person, not to give your own response, but hearing to understand, listening to understand.
Yeah, that's so powerful. We often hear about good listening and that we should, you know, try and work on our listening, but I completely agree. It's all about not preparing your answer to whatever the person in front of you is saying in your head, but actually really hearing and listening to what they have to say. Let's talk then a little bit more about divorce. Are there situations or scenarios that would warrant a divorce, in your experience, or do you think it's just very much couple dependent? It's all very much case by case situation.
I think it's not a clear-cut answer. I think there's definitely things in our deen that we're taught that are grounds for divorce, right? If there's certain rights that are not being given, or if there's certain oppression that's happening, you know, I mean, there are certain rights. Even the first khula that happened in our faith is when you know, a woman comes to the Prophet ﷺ and says that she cannot uphold the rights that her husband has over her because she doesn't like the way he looks. And, you know, the name is escaping me right now, but like, you know, her reasoning was, I don't want to be with him. I don't like the way he looks. He's not physically appealing to me. I have no problem with his character. And that was not allowing her to, from the heart, be the wife that she wanted to be, or he deserved to have, right? Even though he was in love with her. So like our faith and our deen is not about any type of suppression or oppression. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden oppression for himself, and he does not allow it between his servants. And I'm going to say, most importantly, us oppressing ourselves. That has to come first and foremost, because we skip that part and we talk about other people's rights over that they have over us, and how we cannot oppress other people and to be merciful to other people, but we skip ourselves in not oppressing ourselves or being merciful to ourselves, right? And that is included in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects of us. So it's very much a individual couple dependent thing, because like I said, if you are looking at your relationship as a test, which is going to be, if you're looking at it as a means, right? It's half our faith. What does that mean? Marriage is half your faith. Not the wedding, but the marriage is half your faith, right? So if you're looking at it as like, why is that? It means that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala between you as a couple, when you're interacting with each other, when you're speaking to each other, when you're, living together, or is he not? Is he in the picture or is he not? So it's a means of the ultimate goal of getting back to Allah, getting back to Jannah. And your marriage can be that for you, or it could take you away from Allah. And that's the grounds for divorce as well. If for whatever reason you're not compatible, or you're not able to give the person their rights or become closer to Allah, like it's taking you away from Allah. Absolutely. But I think we have to start with not blaming each other, number one, and taking personal accountability and responsibility, and then seeing, is this healthy for me, this marriage, for my spiritual, emotional, physical well-being? What's the purpose of this marriage? Like, is it bringing me closer to Allah? Is it serving a purpose? Or is it taking me away from Allah? So I think those are some broad spectrum things that need to be considered. And then there's a lot of itty bitty things, but they all fall into those categories.
Okay. Let's move on a little bit about the stigma that surrounds divorce in our community, in the Muslim community. What would you say about that, especially sort of in your experience, in your work? Have you seen that change over time at all? Yeah.
Well, there was a time in our faith where it wasn't a stigma, and it's changed. And honestly, to tell you the truth, I see sparks, and I see it is shifting, it is changing. Why? Because we are becoming more educated, and we are seeking more knowledge about our deen. Okay? And the thing is that, this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it incumbent on each individual to seek knowledge. It's our job to know our deen ourselves, not just what people tell us. It's to question, it's to understand, it's to seek out until the heart is satisfied and content. And I see more of that happening now. I actually have a masterclass on my website that's called Why Divorce is Actually Not a Dirty Word. And in that masterclass, I unpack all of the Quranic verses and the hadith that show us that our marital status is not what gives us our honor, our value, our worth, our dignity, and our respect. We get that from existing. We get that from being a servant of Allah. That comes directly from Allah to the self. And no one and nothing can get in between that. But if we don't realize that, then there's a lot of things, stigmas, stereotypes, people that can get in between that and affect our self-esteem, our self-confidence, and our sense of self-worth.
Absolutely. You've led right into my next question, which is all about if family or friends sort of come to a person who would like a divorce and they say otherwise, that they should stay together. What are your thoughts on that and that sort of involvement? And I guess that's related to the stigma that we've just spoken about.
Yeah, that's such a powerful thing that's happening in our ummah, is because when people go for nasiha and advice to their family, their elders, their loved ones, right? Nobody wants to see a marriage break up, right? Like we're trying to preserve marriages to the best of our ability. But sometimes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has offered that to us as a way out as well. And one thing to understand is that when in this, not everybody's like this, but majority of people are like, when parents or loved ones give you advice, no, just stay. And one thing we hear a lot is just have patience and stay. It'll be fine. You know, things will change. Well, nothing will change unless you change. Number one. Number two is our loved ones can also be very emotionally attached, meaning they have their own thinking and their own ideas of why a divorce would not be good for you. And a lot of it is based on fear. A lot of it is based on fear, and it's based on subconscious ingrained beliefs around these stereotypes and biases that people have about divorce, especially about divorced women. Okay. And they're operating from that space. So I would definitely, and I've talked to so many women like this, and I've supported so many women that like their family is saying one thing, and that pressure is so difficult to crack and to break, because you're hearing this and then you're feeling all these feelings of guilt, of like, and it goes into self-loathing and self-bashing, that you're feeling guilty for thinking this, for wanting this, maybe as Allah is upset with me, you know, all these things. And to clear that fog and to clear that haze and to get the clarity that you need to make the choice that you need in the decision, because like I said, at the end of the day, we have to account to Allah the decisions that we make. Our parents are not going to intercede for us, right? Those people are not going to intercede for us. So the choices that you make for your life have to come with clarity and confidence from yourself. And if you're in a state of confusion, to seek out help. First asking Allah, making dua for Allah to give you that clarity and to send you the help that you need to make the right choice and decision for yourself. Pray istikhara. Somebody once told me, oh, you don't pray istikhara to end your marriage. And I didn't know any better, so I was like, huh? I kind of believed them. But then I learned later on that istikhara is for anything or anything. And sometimes, you know, like the purpose of life is not marriage. The purpose of life is to worship Allah. And a marriage could be one of the means. And a divorce can be one of the means as well. So it's very, independent and specific to you as an individual. So what I would say is to seek out professional help, seek out a neutral third party, because sometimes even parents, and I'll tell you one thing, parents, they mean well and they have your best interests at heart. But if they're not in their own wisdom, and if they're emotionally charged, which how could they not be when their child is going through a test, then they're not going to give you the right nasiha. And I'll tell you, my family was not necessarily approving of my divorce, and my divorce wasn't something that I chose. However, I didn't want to get divorced, but Allah knew that this wasn't the right place for me at this time. And I will say that my marriage and my divorce was exactly what I needed when I needed it. But I want to say this point too. When I turned to Allah and when I got the clarity that I needed for what was happening in my life and how I was moving forward, because when you're in a state of clarity and you're in a state of confidence and you have that yaqeen and that tawakkul, that radiates onto other people. It reassured my mother. It reassured my family that, okay, if I'm with Allah and Allah's with me, then I'm good. It doesn't matter. Like she was so reassured. And then she stopped like pressuring me or asking questions, and she just felt reassured. Oh, okay. She said to me, Raisa, if you have that much trust and faith and tawakkul in Allah, then that's fine. Then whatever you do, whatever you decide, then why am I asking? You know, type of reassurance. So that radiates to other people. So what I'm saying is that get yourself to that place. Don't rely on other people to get you there. Rely on Allah, and Allah will bring you whatever people you need in your path.
That's amazing, mashallah. I'm sure that this will be so helpful to our listeners, maybe in the present, maybe in the future, who knows. So thank you. You've already touched beautifully on how that stigma can be reduced with our own family members, even our parents. I wanted to move on to, you've already touched on this as well, But clients that you've worked with where it has been challenging in the sense that they don't want a divorce, but they kind of should, or the other way around.
Yeah, you're right about that. It's always a struggle. It's a heartbreak when one person does and the other person doesn't, right? And oh wow, that is very turbulent. And the reason why I said that is because when one person does and the other person doesn't, there's a lot of nuanced emotional manipulation, some, there could be gaslighting, a term called gaslighting that could be going on where can feel like they're being guilted into staying, or they're feeling like the bad person or the evil person. And that's what I mean by very turbulent. So, some of the things I help people to do is separate the feelings to what is the right thing for me to be doing. What is Allah looking for me to be doing in this situation right now? And know that it is a test. It absolutely is a test in our relationships, and we know we're going to get tested in our relationships as well. So going back to, remind me of your question again. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Just about clients that you've had that have been that you can see that perhaps a divorce would be the right thing here, but they're not inclined to do that.
Okay.
Or if they come to you and they say, I would like a divorce because of such and such and such, but actually it doesn't seem like there are proper grounds, if you will, for divorce, and it might be a case of more reflection that we mentioned before. How do you navigate those challenges in your own work with those clients?
Yeah. So when I listen to people, I listen from here. And being in my own wisdom and connected to myself, it allows me to hear beyond their words. What's really going on for them underneath? What are the needs that are not being met? And it looks like it's something else that's causing those unmet needs for them. So definitely, for sure, I help people to gain clarity on their choice, on their decisions, so they can feel clear, confident, and have that conviction in the choice and the decision that they're making. I don't necessarily tell them what they should be doing, because I don't have that information. That's between them and Allah. And so I help them to separate their feelings. Oh, I'm feeling like this, I'm feeling like this. So we go to the root cause of why are you feeling this way? Where is this actually coming from? And more than not, it's not coming from someone else. It's coming from something that's going on within them. So it is a journey and a process. And a lot of times people come and they just want a quick answer, and they've been sitting on the fence. Most people have been sitting on the fence, I kid you not, years and decades of making a choice of what to do in their marriage. And they're just like so fed up and burned up, and they just want to answer, and they want to move on. They want to be done with it. And I have to help them slow down and come back home, come back to the present moment, and let's deal with this step by step, because you have to feel confident, clear, and conviction in your choice, because you're going to have to answer for it when you go back to Allah. And you have to feel good you have to be in alignment with what you're doing, right? And feeling fulfilled and feeling good about your choices and your decisions only comes when you have that clarity and you have that confidence and conviction. So it's helping them separate feelings or emotional stuff versus what you said of what they need to do. What is their intuition telling them? What is their wisdom telling them? And most of us have been taught to suppress our intuition, suppress our wisdom, and do what we are being told to do, what we think people are expecting us to do, whether it's family, culture, society, whatever it is. That's how we've been taught. So I help them to tap back into their intuition, their own wisdom, their connection to themselves and to Allah, to find that answer for them. And it's not for everybody, because there's going to be people who are not going to resonate with this. It's going to be only for people who want real healing, real change and transformation.
You mentioned also peaceful parting previously. What does that look like? I can appreciate it's different for different people. But any kind of clients' journeys that you can recall now and share that with us, or some general ideas on what a peaceful parting might look like.
Yeah, that's such a huge part of our deen, and it's exactly how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us that when we divorce, and in Surah Talaq, it's not even if you divorce, it's when you divorce, you do it this way, with kindness, with fairness, with justice, right? And so what does that require? That requires taqwa. That requires being conscious of Allah in how you show up with this person in terms of your separation. In separation, it's feelings, intense feelings come up. Maybe with anger, maybe with bitterness, maybe with resentment, maybe with hurt, with pain. So are you acting on your feelings? Are you acting on truth, on what is pleasing to Allah? That is how I help people. Okay, wait a minute. We don't want to make emotional decisions here, because when hurt people. That's just a fact. Healed people heal people. So I help people in terms of when somebody is like, when their spouse or other family members are getting involved and they're saying, you know, they're so many times things come up of, oh, he did this and she did this, and you know, all the stuff from the past comes drudging into the present moment. And people can get very caught up in that scenario and trying to defend or blame themselves, and turns into a big ugly fight. I help people to come back to what is important here. What is Allah looking for me to do in this moment? Every moment we have to ask ourselves that. And am I going to choose Allah, or am I going to choose my ego? And that is the test. And so coming back to what is really important, is that important right now? Is that relevant right now? What is it that you want? Which direction are you headed in? Let's focus on that. And yeah, we need to address your feelings. But remember, your feelings are coming from your own thinking. So we can address that. And what is the lesson in this? What is the healing in this? We don't need someone else for the healing, for the closure, for the lesson. It's between you and Allah. And so it's an opportunity to rise above your ego, to be your best self, to show up with ihsan the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to do, right? In the Quran. And that's what I mean by peaceful parting, because when you are at peace with yourself, then your actions and your interactions are going to reflect that.
That's amazing. I think you've put that in such clear perspective, and yeah, I've just really learned from that, and the sort of different lenses that we can try to use to look at a separation, that brings us out of our own feelings. I wonder how you think grief is related to divorce, because of course a separation has certain links to divorce. How would you say that those two are related?
Yeah, I love that question. And I have a free guide on my website as well. It's called The 7 Stages of Coping and Healing with Your Divorce. And it's all about grief. I mean, grief is real. But what is grief? Grief is feelings, are intense emotions: sadness, anger, shock, denial, depression, bartering, hope, and acceptance. Okay? And that's the phases that a human being goes through. And it's not like, okay, I went through this and now I'm at this. It's like up and down, up and down, up and down. And grief is just feelings, all the feelings I just listed out. So when we understand what our feelings mean, what they don't mean, where they're coming from, and how to process them, it's so helpful in grieving, in allowing grief to come to you and to release it. So you're not holding on to those feelings. And what is that? What's the end stage of grief? Is acceptance, which is part of our aqidah, like acceptance of the qadr of Allah. When we can accept and we can surrender to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will for us, we're not fighting in resistance, right? Because all those other other feelings is because we can't accept, because of there's so much underlying thinking of why we can't accept, because of this and because of this reason, and because we interpret it to mean something about our value, we interpret it to mean something about our worth, we interpret it to mean something about our sense of self. And this is where this understanding comes in of understanding and processing what our feelings mean, what our grief means. And one of my favorite things that was so helpful for me and that I share with others is that when the Prophet ﷺ lost his infant baby son, Ibrahim, rahimahullah, he was grieving. He had so much loss, and he did grieve. He grieved his mother. He grieved his, grandfather, his uncle, his wife, Khadija, rahimahullah. But at this particular time, when he lost his infant son was dying in his arms, he was crying. He was shedding tears. His heart was grieving. He had sadness. However, he didn't allow those feelings to overtake him. And what he said was, the heart grieves and feels sadness and the eyes cry, but the words never say anything that would displease Allah. So we can attain that state as well. We are, the Prophet ﷺ was our example on how to do that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made us capable of doing that. And so that's possible within us as well, to go through tests and trials, which divorce and separation and breakups are, and use that test as a means to get closer to Allah, to elevate your character with patience and resilience and all those beautiful characteristics that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. And also elevate our status with Allah spiritually for the next life.
Amazing. That's such a beautiful reminder. So thank you for sharing that. I guess after one might go through a divorce, you might be looking for acceptance, as you mentioned, and closure. What do you think that looks like? How do you know you've reached that phase of acceptance and closure?
Yeah, when you can feel peace and content with, like, I'm so grateful for the marriage that I had. I'm so grateful for being married to the man that I was. And even now, we don't have a peace. For me, it's peaceful, but we don't have a peaceful relationship in terms of, like, it's still very high conflict, and it's still, there can be a lot of turbulence in our communications. You could label it as a high conflict relationship. But for me, I've learned how to neutralize that and communicate and express what I need to raise the 3 children that we have together. So this question that you asked about, how do you know you've come to the space of acceptance and closure? I think this feeling of contentment, or rida, in Arabic is known as being pleased with what Allah has chosen for you in your life experiences. So, like, for example, for me, I'm content and I'm happy. Like I said, my marriage and my divorce were both great things that I needed during those times in my life. And I can appreciate how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent me those tests and those experiences to build me, to elevate me, and being able to, like, how you're accepted. You don't need, first of all, anybody else to have closure for yourself. It's between you and Allah, like I said. And when it's kind of like turning to your mother later on when you become a mother, and you're like, I get it now, like, I know all the things that you did. Or you're turning to your parent and saying all the things that they did for us was because they loved us and they cared about us and they wanted only the best for us. So when you are no longer fighting, or you wished your life was something other than it was, that's how you know that you've come, like, when you can appreciate, I needed this at this time in my life. I was going down a path that was destroying me and my akhirah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought me back through this test and, elevated me. Like, that's like the most beautiful thing someone can do for you. And the love that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has for us is is not even matched to a mother has for her child. And so I think it's in our heart when we don't wish that life was any other way than the way it transpired. Because, and also understanding that I'll talk about myself, I had to go through the things that I did and the experiences and the tests that I did to become who I am today. And the only one who is to thank for that is Allah.
Just amazing, really. Thank you so much. It's been fantastic. I still have so many more questions. Do you think we could schedule another podcast?
I would love to. I'd love to. This is my drive and my passion, and my heart speaks. And I want to say that whatever I have said that has touched you or anyone else who's listening to this, it comes from Allah. It's directly from Allah to you. And if you're hearing this, you're meant to hear this. And anything that I've said that is wrong or is not correct or displeases Allah, it comes from my own soul, my own nafs. And I would love to have another conversation about this, because it brings me so much joy, and I appreciate you listening and inviting me and helping me to share this message.
Inshallah, Raisa. Thank you so much for your time. I'm sure we'll do this again. And salam
You're very
alaikum.
welcome. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair for joining me on this episode of the Mindful Muslim podcast. I really hope you've benefited from it. It was amazing speaking to Raisa Giwala. I know I certainly benefited. Inshallah, I will see you on the next one. Make sure to give us your honest feedback as well, and like, subscribe, and share this episode. Jazakallah khair.